Spunky by Dori Brink. We're on chapter 15. Last time we found out that they had got another dog named Eric, and Eric snapped at Happy, and so we've got to find out what happened to Happy. Chapter 15. I stayed close to Dodger for the next few days. The house was quiet without Happy. Eric was gone. He had been taken back to the woman that very same night. Daphne's voice shook when she commanded him to heel, but he followed her out of the house with meek, light steps. Each day, Daphne went to visit Happy. We could smell fresh whiffs of Happy's scent on her clothing when she returned home. It stirred us with expectation, but all we could do was wait. At last, one afternoon when Daphne returned, she stepped out of the car and Happy was in her arms. We went wild with joy. A large white bandage covered Happy's head, but he looked down at us with that same silly grin. We leaped about and ran in circles until Daphne lowered him to the ground. Dodger solemnly sniffed him up and down, whining at the medicine smell of the bandages. Happy stood perfectly still for the inspection, his eyes blinking out his suffering to us. Daphne carried him inside the house and lit the fireplace in the living room. She brought Happy's bed close to the crackling flames, and he snuggled into it with sighs of contentment. We stretched out beside him on the floor, and soon a cozy warmth spread over the three of us. It was so good to have Happy back. For a while, everything was back to normal. Happy's wound healed and left only a tiny scar above his eye. I resumed my wanderings on the mountain, and Dodger guarded all of us with renewed vigor. I had no inkling that soon everything would change. I took all the days we enjoyed for granted, even the day I learned to swim. Peter came home early that day and declared he was taking us all to the beach. From the tone of his voice, we knew we were in for a special treat. We were filled with excitement. The three of us were in the back seat. Dodger had her head out the window on Daphne's side of the car, and I leaned out of Peter's side. Poor Happy was in the middle, trying to stretch his neck up. He could have looked out the back window, but I wasn't about to tell him that. When we got close to the beach, the air became laden with the tantalizing smells of fish and seaweed. We sniffed the air hungrily, but Peter did not stop until we came to a parking area on top of a cliff. Down below were jagged rocks. At the very bottom was a strip of sand where the ocean burst into foaming waves, then withdrew to sparkle against the sky. The water returned again and again with a fresh burst of foam. Happy was first at the water's edge, leaping back and forth with the movement of the curling waves. Dodger heeled alongside Peter and Daphne as they walked toward the water. I was completely absorbed smelling the empty shells strewn along the sand until I heard Dodger moan. I looked up just in time to see Peter and Daphne running into the waves. The water was making them disappear. Only their arms and heads were visible above the whirlpools of foam. I ran to join Dodger and Happy. We pawed the wet sand nervously, watching Peter and Daphne getting farther and farther away from us. The cold, bubbling water brushed against our paws, making us pull back into the warm, dry sand. Then I heard a familiar sound, Peter's chuckle. Then Daphne's laugh rang out. I could see them splashing at one another, ducking their heads, smile on their faces. They were having fun. I had to go to them. The sand became soggy, and then it began to slip beneath my paws. I kept moving. The cold water was under my belly now and carrying me along. Dodger was moaning, and Happy was barking at me frantically from the water's edge. But I did not turn back. I kept moving my paws, and miraculously, I was coming closer to them. "Spunky!" Daphne's voice rang out. "Look, Peter, Spunky's swimming!" Peter reached for me and lifted me onto his shoulders. I grabbed his neck and held on tightly, my heart pounding. "Spunky loves the water as much as we do," Daphne declared happily. Wrong, as usual. Peter swam back to the shore with me around his neck. I could see Happy and Dodger prancing about anxiously. When we reached the shallow water, I jumped off Peter and swam toward them. They bounded over to me, eyes full of wonder. I shook myself vigorously, and the cold water sprayed them like pellets. They yelped and jumped away from me, but they had to come back to sniff me up and down. Each time they came close, I shook some more water off my coat, making them yelp and jump back. That was much more fun than the swimming. Chapter 16. What made everything change? Some things happened slowly and at first did not seem very important. But when things changed, they changed so quickly, I was bewildered. First, there were the differences in Daphne. Her familiar quick footsteps around the house became more and more of a shuffling sound. Some days she became weary in the middle of cleaning or preparing dinner and had to go to bed. Those evenings, Peter had to fill our bowls, and there were no treats to be had from Daphne's cooking pots. At night, the conversation between Peter and Daphne seemed to center around a new word. Do you know what it is? Baby. From the sound of their voices, it seemed to be something very special. I wondered what a baby was like. They also talked more and more about Dodger's hives. At least, they kept wondering if it was hives. Dodger had developed a lump on one side of her face, and although she didn't whimper about it, the lump seemed to be growing bigger and bigger. One day, Peter came home early to take Dodger to see the nice doctor. It was one of Daphne's bad days, and Peter made her stay home with us. Happy and I ran to the stone ledge to watch them drive away. We could see Dodger's head sticking out of the side window, looking back at us. And that was the last time we saw Dodger. When Peter returned, he was alone. Instead of rubbing our heads the way he usually did when he came home, he just trudged into the house without even looking at either one of us. We followed him inside. When Daphne saw Peter, the look of alarm on her face made me stand perfectly still. She was at the kitchen sink, her hands dripping with soapy water. Peter put his arms around her and made her sit down in a chair. "It's cancer," he said quietly. "The doctor is operating now. He'll call us as soon as it's over." Daphne took a quick breath and pressed her knuckles against her mouth. Peter brought her a glass of water and made her take a few sips. Then he sat down next to her, and they huddled over the kitchen table talking quietly. I stretched out under the table near their feet, filled with a sadness in their voices. When the phone rang, Daphne jumped up to grab it, overturning her chair as she moved. Then she simply handed the phone to Peter without speaking into it. Peter cleared his throat. "Hello? Yes, I see. You did all you could. Yes, it's better that way." His voice was low, almost a whisper. He put the phone back in place. "Dodger's gone," he said. Daphne sobbed in Peter's arms for a long time. Dodger was gone. I waited and looked for her, but she did not come back. The house seemed empty without her. The field stretched endlessly, and the terrace became a barren, stricken place. Sometimes I visited the tree with a hollow in it, wishing she were still there. Each time I came home from my wanderings, I expected to find that anxious head ready to sniff me up and down to make sure I was all right. But she wasn't there. I missed her. A dull pain throbbed inside me each time I found traces of her scent in the den. In the comfortable nooks of the terrace, in the kitchen, near the fireplace, in her empty bowl. All I could do was wait. I had learned how to wait. In the meantime, I found myself doing the things she did, barking at the milkman and the mailman, keeping a watchful eye on Peter and Daphne and Happy, staying close to the house. Her bowl remained on the terrace outside. Some days it filled with rainwater. When it dried, a film of dust settled on the bottom, but Daphne did not take it away. Tune in for chapter 17 next time.